For the first time since 1967, fatalities have taken place in Indo-China face-off. Three army personnel have died in eastern Ladakh in Galwan Valley. The situation has turned out quite serious. To understand the gravity of the situation and how the things are panning out, we have got two distinguished guests with us. We have got Major General V.K. Sharma, who is a director of United Service Institution of India, a premier think tank. We also have got Sunil Patil, who has worked in National Security Council Secretariat in New Delhi and has also worked at Gateway India, a Mumbai-based think tank. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Major General Sharma, let me start with you. Army Chief just 2 days back said this engagement is taking place at certain sectors in Galwan Valley. But today we have got a situation with 3 fatalities have been reported. So in your assessment, were the disengagement not taking place at the first place, or second, that China is not agreeing to restore status quo ante? Is it this?
See, at the outset, I would like to say that there is no clarification or policy statement issued by the government in regard to what is the real depth of this intrusion that has taken place and what actually has been decided as a process of disengagement. The statements are not in a very comprehensive manner, and these are coming bits and pieces, and most of the information that we get is actually from the media. But from my own sources and my own study, what stands out is that Chinese are asserting for their claims as per 1960 claim line. That would entail that they are claiming the entire area from finger 8 to finger 2 in the north of Pagongso Lake, as also the Galwan Valley. As a result, they have come and plonked themselves in the area a bit ahead of finger 2. And earlier we were patrolling up to finger 8, so they have denied us patrolling from finger 2 up to finger 8. In Galwan Valley, there were a number of patrolling points which China study group had laid out, and those are in the areas of Hot Spring, Gogra and Galwan Valley per se. And they came nearly 2 to 3 kilometers inside to an area. They stopped our construction of link road into Galwan Valley, as also they were in a position to dominate the road Leh, Darbuk, Shayok, those big oldie, right? Indian raised the objection, and after they had put some structures in between. What exactly had happened after that is not very clear. What was clear during the Corps Commanders meeting on 6th of this month was that disengagement will start. That means people will not be in the eyeball to eyeball kind of a deployment where there is a very high risk of personal scuffle and fisticuffs and something happened of that nature. But what were the actual terms and conditions and what was agreed by the two sides was not very clear. This was just a figment of imagination. But in the process, what happens is both sides try in the interim to, gain more and more space. And there are arguments and counter arguments and tempers run very high. And it happens that during the last night, this is exactly what has happened. That Chinese were standing firm on wherever they were. Our side was telling them to push back. And in the process, in the heat of tempers, this scuffle has taken place, which has resulted into the casualties on both sides. Our casualties, 3 are confirmed, and as per some Chinese media, Global Times spokesperson, there are about 5 Chinese probably who lost their lives. and many more may be complex and very, very mixed, and it is very tense. Therefore, it is very, very difficult to say exactly what has happened. But I do not look at this as a classic case of disengagement, and I think probably more and more tension is in the air.
Thanks, General Sharma, for your quite comprehensive answer to start this debate. So let me repeat the same question to you. I mean, General Sharma has made a quite comprehensive statement with regard to what could be the situation there right now. The temples may have frayed out there, both sides are camping. So I just repeat the same thing there. So, I mean, what the media reports we are getting and what our sources are telling us, the Chinese do have intruded into our territory. So what could be the trigger point with regard to this incident? In my assessment is that the Chinese are not agreeing to restore status quo ante. So that if that could have been the triggering point in this situation.
So, sir, I think it's very always difficult to say, I mean, to see why the Chinese have initiated such a hostility at this point in time. And I think if you look at every case of the border intrusion that Chinese have done over the last few years, we have always been in the guessing game as to why did they do it. At least there were some reasons before in the previous cases, because if you see, they did the same thing when before President Xi Jinping came to India, just before the BRICS summit. So we could ascribe at least some of these events to the cases of border intrusions. In this particular case, I think there could be multiple reasons. One could be just to say that, that the Chinese want to see how much India is willing to press its claims on Ladakh after the August 5 move on Article 370 and the creation of Ladakh as a union territory. It could be in response to India's attempts to increase its engagement with Taiwan, which China considers as a renegade province. It could be in response to the revision of the foreign investment norms, which India did a couple of weeks ago in response to the COVID-19 outbreak. It could be in response to India's proactive diplomacy at the WHO. We can ascribe the current border intrusion to any of these events, and still be left with the guessing game as to why did Chinese initiate such hostility at this point in time.
Okay, I mean, what you are suggesting that it's still not possible to comprehend. I understand what could be the triggering point at this juncture, but the fatalities have taken place, and that reflects the seriousness of the situation on the ground. General Sharma, in your opening statement, you talked about the DBO road. The DBO road, it is not that Chinese do not know that we are building this road. The process of construction has been going on for quite a long time. There have been reports that even during the Kargil crisis, Kargil war, Chinese made at least 29 attempts to take up this piece of land where the DBO, where we had air base, constructed the air base. So in Chinese military planning, how strategic this piece of land is there in the eastern Ladakh, and why they are consistently making attempts with regard to the DBO or making incursions in that part of our territory.
See, from Chinese point of view, it is extremely important area, both from defense and from the offensive point of view. Firstly, Karakoram Highway is actually the pass where our border with China is meeting. And if we are able to use that ALG, the advanced landing ground that we have made at those big Urli, and use this road, as also develop our road towards Galwan Valley, then our defensive posture there becomes very, very strong. And subsequently, should tomorrow something happen, then we are in much a better position to project a threat towards Aksai Chin. And Aksai Chin, as you know, is extremely important for them because that western highway is connecting Xinjiang with Tibet.
Exactly.
From Chinese perspective, this area is very, very important because if they are able to come and dominate this area, then from there they can actually enter Shok Valley, and through Shok Valley they can threaten, this Nubra Valley, Partapur sector.
Exactly.
And from the other side across Sesala Pass, they can come into Nubra Valley, and if they are able to dominate that, then the entire, access to Siachen Glacier also gets cut off, right? And should India have any design towards Gilgit-Baltistan, there are two avenues through which that threat can manifest. One is through Shyok Valley, and second is through Chor-Matla sector, which is between, Kargil and Leh. So then they are able to preempt, because they will be a threat from the rear, and they are able to Gilgit-Baltistan. And Gilgit-Baltistan is extremely important for Chinese, because they become de facto third party in J&K dispute. And the very lifeline, the CPAC, is passing through Gilgit-Baltistan. So these are the military strategic level motives that Chinese have, and they know that if we are able to dominate these areas in Galwan Valley, those patrolling points, then probably our domination over that area will increase, and Chinese will not be able to assert their claims as per 1960 claim line, which they actually claim, and where they are presently in a much dominant position.
Okay, now still my question to you, let's take this forward what the General Sharma has stated here, is that I will try to understand from you, the Indian buildup is taking place in Eastern Ladakh sector. Many reports have come up how we are scaling up, ramping up our infrastructure there, building roads there. And these things were known to all the people. And there is also quite a possibility that China would have anticipated the Indian response if they start intruding into our territory. But still, they intruded into our territory, anticipating our response, and still the face-off took place, and then the fatalities took place, and which is quite unfortunate. The situation is getting very serious out there. So if all these factors were there in the Chinese planning of things, and if they are testing it here at this juncture up to this level now, or they do want to scale it up also.
So I think, so it's true that we have scaled up massively the border infrastructure efforts in the last few years, and it was very natural for the Chinese to respond. I think it was a folly on our part that earlier, when the Chinese did the same thing on their side of the line of actual control, we did not press our claims at that point in time. But I think at this point in time, we also have to look at the entire nature of the border resolution talks that have been happening at the level of special representative between India's National Security Advisor and their state councillor. 22 to 23 rounds have taken place of these border resolution talks. And if you carefully see the record of the last 4 or 5 years, every time the round is supposed to take place, it is preceded a few months before by this kind of a border intrusion from the Chinese side. And then the entire focus of the border resolution talks between the two special representatives then goes back to look at that particular situation, rather than taking a step back and looking at the entire gamut of the border dispute. So, and it's a very clever Chinese strategy, and which we have not been able to respond to. So the focus has gone from border resolution to border management, border dispute management. And I think that is something which we need to call out on the Chinese. And now that this violence has happened, and clearly there are so many things which are still in the realm of speculation, because we are still awaiting a very definitive statement from the Indian authorities on what exactly happened. General Sharma has already alluded to that in his opening remarks. We have to use this opportunity to press the Chinese to make sure that they at least exchange their version of the line of actual control with us, because so far what had been happening is that we had made known what is our version of the line of actual control by making sure that we are patrolling in that particular area, but the Chinese have not. And I think that was causing a lot of trouble. The things have come at such point in time that we should now actually praise the Chinese to at least give them their sense of what is the line of actual control.
General Sharma, Sunil has made a very important point that whenever these talks go on with regard to the border resolution mechanism, the Chinese, what he's suggesting is deliberately put up this kind of a situation with us, where we have to revert to this border management than the border resolution. And Sunil is saying that no, the time has come that we have to put our foot forward in a very comprehensive manner to let the Chinese ask what is their perception of border. So do you agree with the Sunil's statement?
I have 6 times to China, and I have a very regular interaction with Chinese. Chinese are not in a mood and in a hurry to resolve border dispute with India strategically, because once a political decision is made and strategically they know, then it is not a big deal. But as long as the issue of Tibet remains alive in their mind, the issue of Dalai Lama's succession and or problems with Pakistan remains alive, and we keep sort of asserting our claims on Gilgit-Baltistan, POK, northern areas, Chinese will not resolve the border issue because this is a pressure point they think they have against India, right? So these are larger issues, and then from time to time, based on the geopolitical situation, they actually start this creeping assertiveness at the border. For example, if you look at in 2013 when Dapsang happened, that time our Prime Minister was to go to China. Secondly, when Xi Jinping was here in India, that is the time they did Chomar.
Yes, sir.
When we boycotted the BRI forum in 2017, and Bhutan also did that, that is the time, you know, they got totally irritated and Doklam happened.
Exactly.
And now at this point in time, when India has raised its voice against China, be it at WHO, be it, you know, giving that symbolic support to President Tsai of Taiwan, be it, you know, capping the Chinese investments into India, be it raising our voice in Gilgit-Baltistan, or reconfiguration of state of Jammu and Kashmir, wherein Home Minister made a categoric statement in regard to Aksai Chin. Now Chinese are telling us, first, do not bandwagon with United States of America and other countries and try and embarrass us, one. Second thing is, the red line for me is 1960 line, and this is a fait accompli, and you will have to accept this. And thirdly, don't make too much of noises against CPAC and BRI and make this very noise. If you do not behave yourself, then I am in a position militarily to cause a politico-military embarrassment to you. And you are in the throes of corona crisis. I've already overcome that crisis. So this is a window of opportunity for me to teach a lesson. These are the motives. That is how Chinese have very deliberately, right at the very apex level, at the level of China's Central Military Commission, the boss of which is Xi Jinping, his commander-in-chief there, supreme commander, and he actually mans the command posts. So at a very macro level, the decision was taken. They did thorough preparations and they come prepared to escalate the situation to whatever level, you know, they want to. And this is the time for India, irrespective of what the cost is, we have to stand our ground and we have to call Chinese bluff, because if we don't do that, it is going to embarrass India in the eyes of our own countrymen, in the eyes of our neighbors, and international community at large.
Samir, I mean, what the general has said, I mean, he has stated quite elaborately what the Chinese military mind would be at this point of juncture and how they would have planned this kind of a situation. Now, what I would like to understand from you, China, what many people understand or what many people have written, that China has assumed that coronavirus crisis pandemic has given it an opportunity to flex its muscles. It sees that Europe has not come out of the crisis. Their attention has got diverted. China has announced that it will impose national security law in Hong Kong, which again has not triggered as much response as was anticipated. It is flexing muscles with regard to Taiwan also. India has signed this treaty with Australia also, which might have angered the Chinese also. So I'm just trying to understand from you what General Sharma has stated, and to premise my question on that hypothesis. if the India at this point of juncture stands up to its feet and say China clearly that enough is enough, we are not going to bend down. You have to show us what is your perception of line of control, and you have to restore the status quo ante. If you do in that manner, will we be able to call out the Chinese bluff? Because India cannot be equated with Hong Kong and Taiwan. This should be told to China in clear terms. This is my understanding, and it will send a message to China also.
I completely agree with General Sharma on what he said earlier about looking at this as an effort directed from Beijing, and Chinese taking a very macro view of this entire thing. If at this point in time India decides to press its claims, I think we have to realize that this is not the India of the 1960s. The Indian Army is not of the 1960s. We are a much better prepared, much better capable army. We certainly have some advantages as compared to the People's Liberation Army. And more importantly, what we have right now is this sort of not exactly formal alliance, but informal understandings with some of the major powers in the world. We have an understanding with the United States, Japan, and Australia through the Quad. We have a much better understanding with the Southeast Asian countries. So I think if India decides to press its claims at this point in time and tell the Chinese, given the current circumstances in which the entire effort of the Chinese with regard to COVID-19, the suspicious handling of the outbreak, the way the conspiracy theories are talking about their effort in spreading the virus and economically disabling many of the economies around the world, I think India stands on a much more firmer ground to press its claims and at the same time get the support of many of the like-minded countries on that particular effort.
General Sharma, Samir is stating that we can get the support of international players with regard to our position also, and as far as China is concerned and how the China is behaving. I just want to understand from you and put a question to you also. If India-US relations get further strengthened, and if the axis against China starts building up quite aggressively, if the Europe also takes into account with regard to what the China is doing and how it's flexing muscles and how it's doing with regard to democracy in other countries also. I'm taking the example of Hong Kong also. Do you foresee this kind of an axis building up, and will the China can be cornered in such a manner?
See, we have to look at this thing at three levels. The first and foremost is the political will within this country. How much we should push the envelope and how much we should call the Chinese bluff. That's extremely important. Military is more than willing and ready to actually size up to Chinese and teach them a lesson or two. That is because I speak with a sense of responsibility, having spent 40 years in the army and still associated in terms of my capacity as a director. We have no such worries and we have no such complexes of 62 as far as Indian military of today is concerned. Third thing is international situation is favorably inclined towards India because post-COVID China has got very badly isolated. They have problems there with United States, but besides that, there are nearly about 100 parliamentarians from all over the world who have joined hands together, and this coalition against China is growing. The Pew survey, which is a very reputed think tank, also puts Chinese popularity today at its nadir, And what they have done very recently in South China Sea to some of the allies or the countries which were very favorably inclined towards them, like Indonesia, Malaysia, Natuna Island issue. They entered the EEZ of Malaysia and climbed one of their, the oil rigs. And likewise with Vietnam, Philippines, and many other countries. So on the whole, the world opinion today is against China and more favorable towards India. And if we are able to, as part of a very cohesive and comprehensive strategy, we are able to combine all these factors and take a bold stand with Chinese, that you go back to 20th April position, and then we can talk about what the LAC should be and what confidence building measures we should take. I think that should be our stand, and if Chinese do not understand that through the process of negotiation, then we should not shy away from exercising our own military options.
Okay. So General Sharma is also suggesting that we should not shy away from we should not rule out our military options also. So I just want to understand one or two things from you also. What General Sharma has also said in his opening remarks also. I mean, if all this kind of planning which has been done by the China at a very micro level, what we are seeing in our eastern Ladakh, could it be linked to that in China wants to send a message to India that it should not stake claims on Gilgit-Baltistan because it impacts its CPAC and BRT project also. And it also wants to say, similar to India also, that India should agree to its program with regard to CPAC and BRT program. Is it that? I mean, if they have planned it so at a micro level, then they must have taken into account these factors also.
We have not really. Our objections on the CPEC and on the BRI, and with regard to the China-Pakistan collusion on the CPEC, it's not like that. The Chinese were not. The Chinese side was not aware of Indian objections. We have been pressing those claims for since 2015-16. We have actively worked with the multilateral agencies to block any funding which comes to the developmental projects in Gilgit-Baltistan, saying that that it's an illegal occupation of the Indian territory, and that's when the Chinese stepped in. So it's not like the Chinese are not aware of our position on the CPEC. And as General Sharma said, that when we objected to the Belt and Road Forum along with Bhutan, they went and did the things in Doklam. So it's possible, completely possible, that they want to send us a message on Gilgit-Baltistan also. But again, it's all in the realm of speculation right now.
It's all in the realm of speculation also, because we are just trying the conjecture here. Because General Sharma has said that not a definitive statement has come out from the government of India with regard to what the situation is out there also and what the Chinese intentions are there. General Sharma, you have said that we should stick to our point that they should restore the status quo ante. Do you believe that Chinese will agree to it? Because many people seriously doubt about it.
See, it is for China to decide what they should be doing. But from my own experience, I can say two things. In all border negotiations with all countries, they had border with 14 countries, they've resolved border with 12 countries, Bhutan and India, the only two countries left. They actually start their negotiations with a maximalist position, and subsequently when the other side is able to bring to bear their own leverages at the negotiation table, then they start making accommodation and concession. If you look at all the borders, Chinese had claimed much more, and ultimately when the borders were settled, they ceded a lot of areas. Here too, they will try and use force and muscle flexing and maximalist position. But if they know that India means business and India will not get cowed down through this military muscle flexing, sooner or later they have no other choice than to reach an accommodation with India. Chinese understand extremely well that if they have a dream of Asian century, that dream of Asian century will never be realized unless they have good and harmonious relations with India and Japan. So in the long run, Chinese would not like to have a very belligerent India. If not very friendly, at least, it could be a relation of intense competition, but not of an adversity. But for that, we need to develop our leverages. We have always been little shy in developing modern infrastructure, spending enough money in our military modernization and things like that. As a result, over the years, the power asymmetry between us and China has grew phenomenally.
Exactly.
And unless we are able to bridge that power asymmetry, Chinese are not likely to make any concession. Here, in this particular case, probably the two sides will push back to certain positions, but the contentious issues will remain and could boil up again whenever Chinese find the time is opportune for them to press this issue. This will come. So this time over, we have to look at a long-term solution, because in the past, Chinese have walked out of all the border agreement, time change the goalposts. So this time we have to call that Chinese bluff and say that now whatever we decide, we'll have to stick to that. But for that, we have to act from a position of strength and not from position of weakness.
Okay, Samira, now to wind up this program, I would like to know your concluding remarks. I mean, General Sharma has said that very important thing that this 21st century is going to be the century of Asian economies. China and India are the big players in these five major economies, including Japan. So China would not like to see a belligerent India. So no, in your concluding remarks, I mean, how we can move forward from what has happened in Kalman with regard to strengthening our infrastructure and with regard to sending a strong message to China. And also, another point, what General Sharma has said, that China may be looking for another opportunity in the future to pinpoint or prick us in such a situation, which could be quite similar to what is happening now.
So, as General Sharma said, we have to make sure that that we develop leverages vis-a-vis China. And as I said, that it could be with regard to the 5G, it could be with regard to a more closer alignment with the United States. It could be with regard to our engagement with Taiwan, a much more firmer engagement with Taiwan. Because one thing on Taiwan that I have observed over the years is that our getting closer to Taiwan is actually dictated by how much our relations are sour with the Chinese. It's not based on the fact that we want to develop the engagement with Taiwan just on its own. If we do that, then we'll have a much closer relationship with Taiwan than being guided by what is happening with regard to our relations with China. Second, technology. I think the technology will be a big factor in terms of determining the geopolitical dynamics going ahead. And as I said, 5G, but I think there are many more technologies such as artificial intelligence, facial recognition, blockchain, where we can join hands with some of the like-minded countries. As there's a new talk about the D10, the democracies, a group of democracies that has been coming about. We can actually join hands with the group of democracies to develop some of these technologies so that we create a very credible counter to the Chinese technological empire, which is there currently. So we have, but at the crux of it, we have to develop the leverages. We have to take a long-term view of the entire thing and make sure that rather than getting diverted from attention with regard to this border dispute, we use this border dispute as a catalyst to make sure that we have a much more long-term view of the Chinese threat and make sure that we work in order to neutralize that particular threat. Not militarily, but at least strategically.
General Sharma, what is your concluding remarks? I mean, Samir has made quite important observations with regard to G10, G7, 5G factor. These are very important observations he has made. So what is your concluding remark?
No, firstly, I agree with him that this D10 initiative is very good. That will include, besides G7 countries, it will include Australia, South Korea, and India. So this is that concert of democracy. Second thing is, we have to tell Chinese in very uncertain terms that there is a need for a new modus vivendi between us and Chinese. They have to respect our core interests, our sensitivities, and our concerns. And for that, with some leverages that we have, he has also spoken about those leverages. We've been little shy in using those leverages. Those plus additional leverages that we can develop with like-minded countries and also regain our influence in our own neighborhood. Like Nepal, to my mind, was highly avoidable kind of a scenario. We could have visualized and we should have preempted this. So don't cede space in your immediate neighborhood and at the same time develop those leverages, and that too with a sense of urgency now. It's not should be at a sluggish, at a snail's pace, but with a sense of urgency, and deal with China from a position of strength. And finally, I would say, I would just quote Paulo Coelho, who is one of my favorite authors. He said, love thy neighbor, but never sell your sword. And what Roosevelt has said, talk softly, but carry a big stick and you will go far. While we maintain a very strong military posture against China, but we keep the window of engagement, strategic engagement, and diplomatic solution also on. And with the combination of this approach, I think a country of our size should be able to prevail upon a bully like China.
I mean, General Sharma, you have already made such a beautiful concluding remark that I don't need to say anything more to add up to what you have said. So, I mean, in the end, I would just say that we take this situation as an opportunity also to develop our leverage, to strengthen our infrastructure also, and to also stand right up to the bullying of China, and also send a strong message to China that you cannot bully us for quite a long time. So in the end, we also hope the situations do not escalate, that this engagement does take place at a very rapid pace, the peace does get restored there, because what I have talking to the locals are quite worried how the situation is developing. So thanks both General Sharma, thanks Samir for giving us your valuable time and also the valuable insight into what is happening there. Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.